Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to bring you my top 10 favorite science fiction books that I read in 2021 in terms of backlist. And what I mean by that is books that were published prior to 2021. I'm going to do a separate list for my new releases, and I'm going to do that not just for science fiction but also fantasy and horror. So if that sounds good, I definitely hope you stick around. I have a whole series planned for my best of the year, including 5 different videos, which is going to end up with over 50 recommendations for you all. So I'm going to have a playlist linked in the cards and description so that you don't miss any videos. And otherwise, let's get into the recommendations here. It was a really good reading year. Now, before we get into the official top 10 list for science fiction, I do want to do 2 honorable mentions, and that is for 2 fantasy backlist books that I really enjoyed and I wanted to mention here. I just didn't have enough backlist fantasy that I loved in order to do a separate video for it, but there were a few standouts. The first one I want to talk about is not just actually a book, but a series, and that is the Heroes of Condor series by Jin Yong. And this is, of course, a classic, traditional, epic fantasy story that is inspired by ancient China. There are 4 books published, and I have the first 3 books here, the first one being A Hero Born. I really love this series because it's a combination of just pretty much everything you're looking for in fantasy. So it has great action, it's all focused around kung fu, and then it also has a little bit of romance, adventure, humor. I just find it to be very well balanced and a lot of fun. The basic setup for the story follows a couple of men who both have young boys, and they decide to join them together and create this lifelong bond between these 2 boys, and then you follow their adventures as they grow up, as they learn kung fu, and what happens to them from there. And like I said, it's just a fun adventure. So if you're looking for more diverse Chinese inspired fantasy, this is definitely the one you gotta be picking up. I had so much fun reading it, and yeah, I can't wait to read it again. And the other fantasy I want to mention is The Shadow Short Days, which is an epic urban standalone fantasy that is set in Iceland, where the author is from and is translated from the language. And this was just so incredibly unique. I don't normally like urban fantasy, but this one involves a school of magic that really leans into the dark arts. The magic system itself is really nuanced and involves different creative work and different artistic outlets like graffiti and art, and I just really liked it. It's multi points of view, and one of the point of view is that of a student who is going to the school and trying to learn forbidden magic. There is also a plot of rebellion against the ruling body, and it's just a really good story. It definitely leans a little bit into horror by the end, and it's just so unique, and I really would love to see more people picking it up. In my opinion, this is absolutely a hidden gem. Alright, moving on to the official top 10 list for the best science fiction that I read that was published before 2021. At the number 10 spot is a duology, and that is the Secession duology by Scott Westerfeld, the first book being The Risen Empire. This is set in a far-flung galaxy where there are these warring bodies, these 2 epic scaled empires that have very distinct ideologies that really are oppositions to each other. On one side, we have an empire that is ruled by almost a lich character, where the emperor himself is undead and has found the ability to have long-lasting life. And then on the other side, we have this group that worship artificial intelligence and put them up almost as gods themselves. And these 2 warring bodies just cannot make peace because, again, their ideologies are so distinct and different from each other. The first book starts out with the one group stealing away the daughter of the lich, the undead emperor, and the other group, of course, has to go and attempt to rescue the young princess. And so the story is just epic in scale. It has some incredible ideas, and for me, I just fell in love with the world building. It gave me Star Wars vibes in terms of the evil empire, And I just really like the creativity of these books, and really I just want more in this universe. And yeah, 2 books was not enough. I had a lot of fun reading these. Then at number 9, we have The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, and this is a classic story of a time traveler who goes into the future and finds what appears to be a utopian society, but there's possibly more going on. It's a quite short book, and I thought that it really packed a punch in just a few pages. I love the conversations around time travel theory, the concept of time being a 4th dimension that is discussed at the beginning of the story, and then the story itself was really compelling, really immersive, and I just really enjoyed it. It definitely sparked my love for H.G. Wells' work. Next at number 8, we have Dune by Frank Herbert. Yes, I have this classic book on the list, although a lot of you might be disappointed that it's not higher up. This, of course, is the classic story of Paul, the supposed chosen one who goes off to the sand planet of Arrakis with his family. The story involves epic adventures, backstabbing, and it's a really nuanced story, and I admit I didn't fully appreciate it the first time I read it. I picked it up because the movie was coming out, and while I liked it, I didn't love it, but then I went on to reread it a second time, and that's when the story really clicked for me. I can absolutely see why people say that this is a book that they read over and over again, because there's, again, so much packed into the story in terms of themes and commentary. And while this is really a story with a lot of action at the same time, I found myself most compelled by the conversations between the characters, the discussions and commentary on the larger political and economic scope of the planet. And I loved all those details. I definitely want to continue on with the series and again revisit this one time and time again, and hopefully it'll become a greater favorite as time goes on and would end up higher up on a science fiction top 10 list. Then at number 7, we have Invasion of the Body Snatchers by Jack Finney. This is a story that is told from the perspective of a doctor whose patients reach out to him because they believe that their family members are not quite their family members. They act like their family members, they look like them, but something is just not quite right. And they begin to worry that maybe someone has stolen away their relatives and replaced them with some sort of clone and has basically body snatched them away. I love the setup for this book. It was such an enjoyable ride, and I certainly probably enjoyed it a little bit more because of the fact that it is science fiction leaning into horror, and so it didn't have a lot of science fiction elements to it, but it was an incredibly fun story to read. I've never seen the movie, and so it was just so enjoyable to go through. It definitely is a book that is of its time. It does feel dated, but I mean that in the best possible way. That actually added to my enjoyment, and yeah, I just loved it a lot. Absolutely delight. If you haven't read it, it's definitely worth returning to this classic because I think it's so accessible and just so entertaining. Then at number 6, we have The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, which of course is the classic story of the Martians coming to invade Earth. And I really love this one. The beginning was absolutely terrifying and haunting, and even more so, I thought the ending really left an impact on me. I read it twice this year because I loved it so much, and to this point in time, it is my favorite H.G. Wells book. And again, I think like the last book I mentioned, this one definitely benefits from the fact that I love science fiction, but I also love horror. This one certainly is not as horrifying as some of the movie adaptations, but I think it really holds up. It's so well written, it's so nuanced, and I definitely want to revisit it again and again because yeah, I loved it a lot. Then at number 5, we have 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, and this is the epic science fiction adventure story of a group of people that go off on a ship to track down what they believe to be a sea monster that is destroying other ships along the ocean. What they find is something else, and through circumstances they end up on a submarine that is captained by Mr. Nemo, and from there they go on a deep sea adventure together and have to decide how to attempt to get off of this submarine and get back home. I love this book so much. It was such a surprise. I picked it up on a whim them just again because I'm trying to read through more science fiction classics and fill out those gaps in my reading. And I ended up really loving this one. There is so much time spent on the details involving the ocean, the marine biology, how the ship navigates, and I love that. Other people might describe this book as one big info dump, but if it is, I fully enjoyed it. I love learning things through my science fiction, and that was certainly the case here. I found the details to be so entertaining, and while it's not technically a piece of science fiction horror, because of the fact that it's an adventure story, it kind of leans into a similar narrative and has some of the similar tropes that I really love, and I just had a blast reading it. I can't believe how much fun I had with it, and it definitely, just like with H.G. Wells, has really sparked an interest in Jules Verne's work, and so far this one is definitely my favorite. Then at number 4, we have Ship of Fools by Richard Paul Russo. And this is a story that is set in a future where humanity has left Earth. We are following one ship where the crew has no direction or plan in place in what they are trying to accomplish. And so they are just pretty lost. At the beginning of the story, it starts out with a mutiny of the crew. And then later on, they discover a ship where possibly the ship that they find is not of human creation, but instead might be an alien ship. And so they go off to investigate, and well, when they do, the ship is just not quite right. People are having accidents and getting hurt. And this, if you can't tell, is a piece of space horror. So again, given my interest in not just science fiction, but horror, this book was right up my alley. It is so unsettling. The atmosphere is fantastic. And it also offers some really smart, nuanced commentary on religion and people finding their own purpose in life. And I liked it a lot. It's just a little bit off kilter. It just feels a little bit wrong. It's hard to put your finger on it, but I would love to see more people read it because I don't think it gets the attention that it deserves. And yeah, I had a lot of fun reading it and is easily one of the best space horror books I've read to date. It will take a very special book to knock it off of my favorites in that subgenre category. Then at number 3, we have The Rig by Roger Levy, and this is a really unique science fiction story to recommend and describe. It is told over multiple perspectives, set over a long span of time. At the beginning of the story, we follow a young boy who is living on a very religious, conservative planet, and they are very much cut off from the rest of the systems, and slowly through circumstances, he begins to lose his innocence. It's kind of a coming-of-age story as he becomes friends with another young boy who moves to this planet, and through him, this epic adventure starts, and they are forced to go on the run. The story involves, as the title suggests, this unique rig, and it ties into the story. There is also crime factions and danger and backstabbing, and this book also does some really interesting things with the future of the internet. The author has a lot of fun, including some words that are some future slang, and you get to kind of figure out how it all connects together. And I like, again, how the future is imagined with the newer technology. And it's just a really creative book. It just felt a little bit different and not like all the science fiction books I read over and over again. So if you're looking for something really unique, something that in my opinion is very much underhyped and underappreciated, I would really recommend The Rig. I had so much fun reading it that when I finished reading it, I went back and immediately reread the entire thing because I loved it so much. Then at number 2, we have The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. And this, of course, is a classic story of a group of missions where Earth sends off astronauts to Mars and they meet the locals and the story goes from there. This is technically a novel, even though in a lot of ways it reads more like a collection of short stories, and I ended up really enjoying it. Compared to a lot of first contact stories, this one feels almost more cozy. It doesn't have a lot of hard science fiction to it. It's very much more about the characters and a lot more commentary on Earth. Even though this whole book is set on Mars, it really is a reflection on humanity and the way that we go about going to colonize other places rather than appreciate what we have back home. And I just thought that it was very well written. It's very witty and smart, and I loved it so much. It was just the right length with some really powerful moments written throughout the story. And like basically everything else on this list, this is one I'm dying to reread because I think I will love it more and more every time I revisit this and get more out of the stories. And we have made it to the #1 spot. For those of you that follow my channel closely, you might be able to guess what I'm about to show, but my favorite science fiction book that was written before 2021 was absolutely Blind Sight by Peter Watts. This is a first contact story where there are some sort of alien that seem to make contact with the Earth, and so then a group of people are sent off on a ship to go and make proper first contact and meet what is out there. The ship is run by a vampire, and you have this really unique setup because this is a piece of science fiction, but it also leans into horror and is also one of the most intellectual, complex, philosophical books I have ever read, and I loved it so much. I basically spent all of the year chasing any book that could give me a similar feeling to it. I tried to read the sequel, which was unfortunately disappointing, but this completely works as a standalone. It has amazing commentary on so many philosophical and scientific ideas. I love the conversations around consciousness and what it means to be human and communication, and I've read this book twice again because once was not enough, and quite frankly twice was not enough, so I can't wait to revisit it again. At the end of the book there is this incredible appendix where the author goes through where he drew the science from and kind of weaves it into the story, and it's so great. Again, I'm not someone who even likes vampire fiction, so to have a story that connected so well for me and incorporated those details in a way that didn't feel campy or out of place was just incredible. This book is so atmospheric, so scary and unsettling and so unique, and I just fear I will never find a book like this. So definitely a favorite of the year, and honestly likely a favorite of all time, because yeah, this book was amazing. Highly recommend. Not for beginners, but it is well worth working your way up to reading this one, and I hope you love it as much as I do. So that is it. We've made it to the end of the video here of the books I talked about. Which ones are you most interested in picking up in the coming year? And I would also love to hear from you. What is your favorite backlist science fiction book or fantasy that you read? And if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I do read a lot of science fiction as well as some fantasy, horror, and thrillers. And if you hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. And before you go, don't forget to check out the rest of my Best of the Year playlist so that you don't miss any of my recommendations. It's been a fantastic year, and I'm so excited to share so many good books with you all. I think that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.